try.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everyone. So you're getting a little bit of the behind the scenes for our show today, What's Happening Yucatan, that goes live right now on the radio, 89.3 Radio Mundo. This is What's Happening Yucatan with me, Stephanie Carmen, and my recurring guest, Nancy.
Hi, everybody.
Yes, Dr. Sweeney, and we are talking addiction today. We do different topics, different psychological topics. And this week we are doing one on addiction, so stay tuned as we get all set up here with the mics, etc. So hold on. Okay, ya estamos listos. Okay. A ver, déjame ver. Let me pull up my radio stuff. Okay. Déjame. Okay, there we go. All right. Actually, let me do my timestamps. Let's see, so I know where we are here. Plus 12 is 37 plus 7 plus 12, 9, 47.
I'm so bad at math.
57, 07. Does that sound right?
Signing up your breaks.
07, yeah. And 17, is that right? Yeah, that's about 45 minutes. Okay, good. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to What's Happening Yucatan, your Friday night show with me, Stephanie Carmen. For those of you who do not know me, I am the creator and editor of Mid-City Beat, an English publication online. We are super active on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, as well as our website, www.midcitybeat.com. And we have a calendar of events where we get up lots of events on there, so check that out. It's events.midcitybeat.com. And let's see, what else? I feel like I got all sorts of ways to communicate with you guys. You know what? We've been getting out our newsletter every month as well. So if you're interested in getting the newsletter, go to the website. You can sign up there and you will be part of our newsletter community as well. So tonight I have a fun topic, but we're not going to get there yet because I have a few things to mention, tell a little bit of what's coming up soon. But I do want to let you know a little hint about the upcoming topic. I'm here with Dr. Nancy Sweeney. So we are doing psychology again today, which is always kind of a favorite topic of mine. And well, of course, Dr. Sweeney has been a recurring guest here for about 2 years now, right? Yeah, I think so, pretty much since I started the show. So today's topic, I think, is really interesting. It's called Chasing the High, Stories of Addiction. And we are going to be in the part 1, what is an addict and how do we know? So don't go anywhere. Stay tuned because I think this is a really interesting topic and important for everyone really. But I do have a few shout outs as well. As we know, we are now officially in Buen Fin. So, this weekend, there's, you can go out to all the shopping malls, etc. You have all sorts of sales. And I want to remind everybody at Calle 20, which is a furniture store and also an interior design house. That's 100% Yucatan, and they just do a fantastic job. But they are having a lot of really great sales this weekend. They're actually until the 20th of November. So check them out. They are on Garcia Lavin, and you can go into their social media and check all of their discounts as well. And Ace Hardware is rolling out the major deals for the Buen Fin. But not only for Buen Fin, also for Thanksgiving. They're doing like a Thanksgiving sale and then a Black Friday that lasts like 3 days. So basically the whole month of November, they are on fire. So they got lots of things. They have water pumps, the barbecues, I think on Thanksgiving are going to be on sale. So if you're looking for something for your house or you need something, it's a good time to go to Ace Hardware. And of course, if you're a member of Mid-City Beat, and a member, meaning a paying member, you pay 99 pesos a month and you get all sorts of different benefits. And one of those is a card where you get discounts all over Yucatan and Campeche and other places. At Ace Hardware, you always get 10% off. So that's actually a pretty good deal.
That's cool. I had forgotten about that.
Yeah, you got, when you need something for your house, definitely remember Ace Hardware because they have really high quality products out there as well. And also, in November, Humile's restaurant just changed their menu. They are a Mexican restaurant out in the harbor, and they have fantastic food. And I've been their client for a couple of years now, well, basically since they opened. I think it's their 3rd anniversary that they're celebrating. And they do breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They are also a member of the Mid-City Card, and they're giving a 10% off the bill, but also you got to tell them that you're a member, and they'll give you something special from either the bar or the kitchen as well. So you got lots of little perks there at Humile's. So yeah, check Humile's out if you're up by the harbor. Definitely a recommended restaurant up there. Also, of course, Terraza and Gato in the centro of Mérida. The Terraza is in the Remate de Paseo de Montejo. And they have lots of events and music, and it's a cool nightlife spot. It's a rooftop. You can see Paseo de Montejo. And their food is excellent. They also have some changes to their menu where it's now combined with Italian and Mexican. So you got a little, you got some, a choice for everybody there. So you can check them out. And El Gato is the little speakeasy bar. That's also pretty popular. And they have DJs, etc., starting, I think, around 10. But if you're looking for a place to go on the night out, or maybe tonight, and seeing it has Friday night, Terraza is always a good one. Terraza, and then, downstairs they have Remate, and then they have Pizza Neo. Pizza Neo is also more of they've changed their menu a little bit more as well. It's not just pizza, it's a full Italian menu. So you can go in there and get some great Italian food, or Remate has really good breakfast. We were there not too long ago for our brunch, right? Our insider brunch. So they have great, what did you have for brunch? Do you remember? What you had at Remate?
I've had there a couple of times. I've had their enmolada with mole.
Oh, yeah.
And recently I had their smoked salmon on sourdough bread, which was fabulous. Absolutely fantastic.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I think I had a bite of that. Or one of your sweet breads, I think, because they also bake their breads.
And they bring them out to you.
And they bring them out.
Coffee.
Yeah, exactly. So that's always a great spot. And of course, that's right in the Remate de Paseo de Montejo. And then, Salon Gallos is another one that I want to give a shout out to. Their menu is really off the charts as well. They have Lebanese and Mexican food. And of course, they're a cultural center. So they have a big nightlife scene, but they have a really finely curated gallery. They have a cinema, so you can go watch films, all kind of alternative films. They have a really great lineup. I always check every week their lineup to see what I want to maybe go see. And then, of course, their restaurant is a great place to put on the list. So those are some ideas for you all this weekend. I know I like to get you guys current on what's going on out and about in this lovely town of Mérida.
There's so much to keep track of. It's
insane, and believe me, that's like my full-time job, and even I can't always do it. So let's get on to our topic for today. So like I said, today I am here with Dr. Nancy Sweeney, who is from a psychologist from Harvard University, has lived in Mexico, Yucatan, Mérida. Actually, she lives a little out. You live in Cholula now.
Now I'm in, Gran San Pedro, Cholula.
On the other side of the periférico.
Out in the suburbs.
Out in the burbs. But you've been here for a couple of years now, or about 5 years. 6 years. Oh my gosh. 6 years now. And you still practice, you still see
I still have kind of a part-time practice of basically life coaching, consulting, counseling, that sort of thing, partly online. So works very well for me.
Yeah. So like I said, Nancy has been a recurring guest, and we are talking this time. It's going to be a 3-part series called Chasing the High, Stories of Addiction. So today we are looking part 1, who is an addict and how do we know? So good question.
So yes, well, what I would like to open up with are 4 case studies. I'll give you a paragraph on each of these people. These are not actual people. They're based on kind of a composite of clients that I've worked with, things that I've seen in my clinical practice. But they kind of give you a flavor. You can, as you hear this, you can kind of think for yourself whether you think this represents an addiction.
Okay.
And so case number 1 is a retired school teacher who for many years has gone on the weekends to play slots in the casino. And since his wife passed away, he's been going to an additional 2 or 3 times during the week as well. He says it's the only time he can have fun and relax. He really likes the thrill of anticipation when he starts to think about how well the staff at the casino treat him, the excitement he feels when he wins. He feels important and special. And for a few hours, he's not lonely. He's avoided looking at his savings account for the past few months and feels a twinge of anxiety when he thinks about that. So that's case number 1.
Okay, so you want my opinion to see what am I?
Sure.
Okay, so my idea is that an addiction is a toxic behavior. And again, this is what I'm thinking, so you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But it sounds to me that it's not really an addiction for him, but a way for him to feel better and distract himself in not necessarily a toxic way, unless he's spending way too much money. The money part is...
You're going to find it interesting.
Okay,
Yeah, we'll
okay.
go back to that.
Okay.
You'll find it very interesting. So case number 2, an adolescent takes her phone to bed with her every night. She's texting, she's on social media with friends and sometimes strangers.
Yes.
Doesn't fall asleep until 4 a.m, falls asleep in class the next day. When her mother started confiscating her phone every night at 9 p.m., she'd wait until her parents fell asleep and she'd sneak into their room and retrieve it from her mother's bedside table. She and her dad are now in a pitched battle over her parents' daily monitoring of her phone use. So that's
Yes,
case
I
number
would say,
2.
yes, ding, ding, ding. That's an addiction. That's an addiction.
How about number 3? A successful middle-aged executive believes that it's uncivilized to serve good food without a glass or 2 or 3 of fine wine. However, his business is currently struggling to keep up with changes in his field. His wife is spending a lot of time with her book group and her women friends in the evening, so he's starting to fear that she's losing interest in him. He's begun opening up a second bottle of wine after dinner, or may have a little bit of high-quality brandy. Only the best, he says.
I would say, yeah, that might be something he needs to look at. Yeah.
How about case number 4, the last case? A 40-something woman is the main caregiver for her elderly mother who's becoming demented and is more critical and demanding by the day. This woman works a job she does not enjoy in hospital administration and has little social life since she attends to her mother several times a week. And this leaves her physically and emotionally exhausted. Her only comfort is cooking and baking, and she sometimes eats an entire pan of brownies on her own, leaving her with a feeling of self-loathing. She's gained considerable weight over the past 2 years, and her doctor is concerned.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that sounds like an addiction as well. Because I guess, what it sounds like is like people trying to feel better in a situation when they're not feeling better, so they're looking for some outside thing to make them
one
feel
of the
better.
key features that we ordinarily think of when we think of addictions. And to start off, let's think about the difference between addiction, how it's used in popular culture versus clinical definitions. Because as many of the topics we've talked about, there can be a popular usage of a word that's very different than the clinical definition.
Right, and we've talked about that a lot on some of our topics.
Of narcissism and
right,
things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, but we're gonna have to take a quick commercial break, so don't go away, and we'll get into this definition here. Welcome back to What's Happening Yucatan, your Friday night show with me, Stephanie Carmen. And so we are talking tonight about addiction, if you are just joining us. And the topic is Chasing the High, Stories of Addiction, Who is an Addict, and how do we know? So Dr. Nancy Sweeney is here with us tonight, and she was just giving us some scenarios. I'm guessing if it's an addiction or not. But so let's go back over. Okay, so the definition of addiction.
Let me give you the definition from the American Society of Addiction Medicine. So this is the clinical side of things. This is a fairly recent updated definition, 2019. They say addiction is a treatable chronic medical disease involving complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and an individual's life experiences. People with addiction use substances or engage in behaviors that become compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I get that.
There's been a lot of debate in the clinical field about whether you can call things like, a lot of times you hear people talking about, I have a shopping addiction, or,
Well, and that's what we were talking about before the break, right? Our kind of like flippant ideas of addiction and what really is addiction.
And the clinical definition. And sometimes I think the clinical definition almost has to catch up to the popular definition. We ask questions, can you be addicted to chocolate? A lot of us joke about that. And I have no problem with my chocolate addiction.
Right.
But so let's take a look at the DSM-5 criteria, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which we've looked at in the past for things like narcissism. Let me just pull that up. Okay, so here's their definition, the DSM-5. Loss of control is number one. The person who swears they'll have just one drink, but they end up closing the bar. That's a clear definition.
Right.
Number two, the desire to cut down. People who are troubled by their use of some substance or behavior, but they find they can't cut down. Number three is the time spent. Someone spending hours every day on this behavior, or thinking about, or recovering from this behavior, or substance use. So their whole life starts to revolve around this particular problem. Number four is craving. An overwhelming desire to use the substance as they're talking about it here. It's like being hungry, but instead of food, your body's screaming for the drug. That's kind of the classic.
Right.
Number five is a failure to fulfill obligations. So you're letting other things slide. Like the student who is falling asleep during class because she's been up all night on her phone.
Right.
Or, they name like the parent who forgets to pick their child up from school because they've already started drinking. And people with addiction, they continue to use despite having problems. So they've got, maybe they've got a DUI, driving under the influence, and they continue to go back out there. Or somebody who has physical, liver damage or things like that, but continues to drink.
Right, it's physically hurting their body.
It's physically hurting them, or there are other consequences in their lives. So number 8, use in hazardous situations, driving under the influence is a classic, or real hardcore drug users using needles under unsanitary conditions.
Right.
People who continue to use despite physical or psychological problems, like someone who continues to smoke despite having emphysema. They can't stop. Number 10 is kind of a classic symptom tolerance, when people have to use more and more and more of a substance to get the same effect. And number 11 is withdrawal. Somebody gets shaky, irritable, and nauseous when they can't use their substance of choice. So these are kind of the classic symptoms that we would have seen. However, the picture is, I think, becoming more interesting, really. When we look at, when I was, I've seen it through my clinical practice over the years. And, when we were invited, I worked on a dual diagnosis unit where people had addictions and severe mental health disorders. And
right, which I think a lot of times it goes hand in hand.
Exactly. Yeah. So, when you think about addiction, I always thought about, physical withdrawal, that sort of thing. That's not necessarily critical to the definition, according to some experts. They say really what you're looking at are brain changes. And this is really interesting because People like Dr. David Nutt in Great Britain, they actually, it's really interesting thinking of why gambling is a physical addiction.
Uh-huh.
He set up this brain scan, and he set up kind of like a mock gambling situation where the person would go into the brain scan and they'd have a screen in front of them with their roulette wheel, and they had a keyboard they could use to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were able to measure the changes in the brain as this person was gambling.
He's getting that stimulant.
Yes, he's getting that stimulant. Exactly.
He's getting his hit.
He's getting, basically, yes, that's exactly right. They found the changes in the brain were like cocaine or alcohol. I mean, the kind of centers that are responding in that situation are the addiction centers.
Right, because when we think classically of addiction, of course we think alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, okay, those are the addictions. But these behavioral addictions like gambling, or like the cell phone, or even love addiction, which we haven't mentioned.
Absolutely.
That's like, people talk a lot about that now. Are addicted to some sort of a person, really. A toxic behavior person. There's like this weird addiction.
Yes. I think there's a lot in common. And this is where we get into a really interesting gray area. Mm-hmm. And of course, in a clinical setting, they're trying to be very scientific. If they can't measure it, it's hard for them to sign on. And so far, the behavioral addiction that they've signed on for as an official addiction is gambling, because they can measure the brain. Now we have things like, as you said, love and sex. We've got, chocolate. We've got people who really crave too much food.
Well, what about the cell phone? Is that not? This
is a big topic of research right now, because we're seeing the generations coming up now who were raised on the internet, unlike those of us who are really old, and they're looking at the brain changes, and they're looking at with a question of, okay, does this in our official, are we going to add this to our official Bible of mental disorders, And so I suspect that will be, but right now, of course, wanting to do things very scientifically, they're looking at the research, they're looking at the brain scans as they come in.
And I'm sure they're seeing that, I don't know, is it dopamine or I don't know what it is. I'm sure they're seeing that.
Dopamine every time, every time you go on, your favorite social media, Instagram or something.
See all those funny reels that you see. You don't want to think about the argument you just had with your loved one. You just want to go on there.
Oh, look at the funny dogs on TikTok. Yeah.
Seriously.
Not that we don't all need an escape sometimes, let's face it.
Right. Well, and you know what? I think that is also, and we are going to have to go for a quick commercial break, but before we go, I think that is the thing, when is it just that because, we all want to escape the argument from our loved one or whatever, and I think there's some healthy ways to do that.
There are healthy ways
and
to
even,
do that.
even if it's not so healthy and you want to just go on your phone or watch a movie or whatever. But like, when does it go into like a pattern of addiction that's harming for you?
Cross the threshold, as they say.
Right.
And, thinking about those criteria that I named before, those 10, 11 criteria, when it's taking over your life.
When it's taking over your life. Okay, so we are going to cut out for a quick commercial break. Do not go away. Welcome back to What's Happening Yucatan, your Friday night show with me, Stephanie Carmen. And we are talking addiction tonight with Dr. Nancy Sweeney, and our topic is who is an addict and how do we know? So we're kind of trying to decipher this. Addiction is a lot more complicated than I think people we generally think. If you really start to analyze it, I mean, there's a lot of different addictions. We were talking people are addicted to their phone or addicted to a person, a love addiction, a sex addiction, obviously alcohol and all of these things. So, how is it that we know? Okay, so we can see our own behavior. Let's say with alcohol, because I think alcohol is one of the most common. Unless you don't drink at all, which I commend. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of willpower. But unless you don't, and you do drink, it's like, okay, am I drinking too much? Was this bad, because it's a hard thing to regulate sometimes. If you go out for dinner and you have a glass of wine at your dinner all the time, or whatever, however it is you unwind.
When I was in clinical practice and people were worried or their families were worried and they'd come to me and they'd say, am I an alcoholic? I'd say, let's throw that word out the window. It's not very useful.
Okay. Yeah.
I would say, I'm going to help you kind of examine your own use, and you can decide for yourself, is this really causing a lot of problems? You know? And let's, so I would go through, kind of questioning them about, well, how often were they using? Did they have other activities? Were their family members upset about it? Did they have DUIs? Did they have problems at work? I mean, really, it's best self-diagnosed. Now that's, there are some times I think when people are too far gone to self-diagnose and they're scared and they're afraid to even look at it. And that's understandable,
Or people self-diagnose. They know they are, and they know their behavior's really bad, but they can't quite get a handle on it.
Yes, then you have to talk with them about what the options are. What are the alternatives? Because this is one where a lot of people use alcohol and enjoy it, and it's great, and it really enhances their life, and it's fun.
Right.
And so I think when we look at some of the criteria, like, not fulfilling your other obligations, and you've got problems related to this, but you still don't want to stop, and you're giving up, they talk about the person who used to love playing guitar, but now doesn't do that anymore. They spend all their time drinking or doing drugs, driving under the influence, get that designated driver.
Right, or the Ubers, right?
Uber's a great solution for that.
Yeah.
And if you find that you need more and more and more of whatever it is to achieve the same effect, then you need to really look at that.
Well, and when people are addicted to something, I mean, it's hard to stop a lot of times. It's really hard to stop.
And that's where people really, if people have concerns, I think the most important thing is to find somebody who's able to sit down and think it through with you and think about what the options are. What could be helpful, And I used to work with people. I say, okay, if you only want to cut back, let's do an experiment. Cut back for a month, keep a journal, see how it goes, and you tell me, what it's like. Do you feel like this is something you can control? Yes. Are you sleeping better? Alcohol notoriously disturbs sleep. It's a short-acting sedative, so people wake up in the middle of the night.
Yes, which I have experienced, yes. And I remember you saying that at one point, and I was like, oh, there it is. That was those 3 glasses of wine from last night. Yes, 3 in the morning.
So a lot of people get trapped in that cycle where it helps them fall asleep at first, but then they wake up, and when people really get physically addicted, then they're drinking during the night when they wake up.
Yeah.
And a shot in the morning to get over their hangover.
Right, the old hair of the dog.
Yes, exactly, exactly. But there are so many treatments available, and we'll talk about that down the road. I think in our third session, we're going to talk about where do we go from here. But
right.
There are things that can help reduce cravings. I don't believe anybody should suffer needlessly, know, and if there's something that can help make it easier, then by all means, give it a try.
Right. Well, obviously, when you find that you're addicted to something, you know that there's an issue, because it seems like addiction has a negative connotation. So it's like, okay, when you say, okay, I think I'm addicted to this behavior, or I'm addicted to, how can we kind of pull ourselves out of that? I mean, I think that there's kind of like, it's a very hard struggle. Especially if you're physically addicted and it's gone over you've gone over the hill of big time addiction. Yeah. But when you're, let's say, talk about cell phones, right? How you have to be really disciplined to say, I need to cut this out of my life because I think it's affecting the way I'm communicating, or my brain assimilates information.
We have a long way to go in terms of addressing the effect of technology on the brain. I feel like my concentration is not as robust as it used to be. I spend I like being online and all kinds of interesting stuff going on. And so I think we have a long way to go, particularly for young people whose brains are, as they're developing, are being influenced by the use of media.
Right.
And that's one of my big concerns. And certainly, American Association of Pediatrics says that kids under the age of 2 should not be exposed to any screen time. So don't give your kid your phone to distract them while you're doing something else if they're that young, because I've seen it happen. Kids, oh my gosh, I remember some of my nephews, they knew how to pick up my sister's phone and access Curious George before I think anybody else. Now, how did they do that? How did they figure it out?
Right.
Kids will figure it out. It really draws them.
Right, exactly. And just touching it, when we do lose our concentration or our ability to focus on something for
Mhm.
a certain amount of time, I mean, like what are really the repercussions of that? I mean, what do you think?
I think, when you think of the pathways in the brain, if you're going down those same short pathways over and over again, I think you lose easy access to the other pathways. And when you think about, one of the problems with addictions, as they say, it hijacks the brain. That quick feeling of pleasure, that quick pop of dopamine, the pleasure center being activated, it's easy. Addiction initially is very easy. You can just take a pill, take a drink, go online, gamble, and you get this kind of excitement, this heightened sense of well-being that's not normal. And so if you're having a bad day, it can feel really good. But what you sacrifice, I think, in the long run is the ability to feel normal enjoyment, tranquility, peace, joy. You just don't have that kind of, less intense, less dramatic sense of well-being. And that's why it's so hard for addicts to recover, because they need to learn to tune into, to really develop that more robust, normal sense of well-being rather than the excitement of the high. And that's a lot to ask them to give up.
Right.
But what they don't know is that you can feel better in a different way, and that will work much better in the long run.
Right.
Because people in the throes of addiction, let's face it, they have to feel worse before they can feel better if they're going to be in treatment. And so they need to know that, people do this. They do get better. They have happier lives,
Right.
Things go better. They have better relationships.
Right, because they have the highs.
Yeah.
And then they have the extreme lows. When you're in that cycle of addiction, you have the
up
highs.
and down and up and down.
Right, because then you come down and then you feel guilty for everything you've not done in your life, or how you treated this particular person, or even if you remember what you did, like if
the blackout
drugs, drugs and alcohol.
And then they want to use that substance more. I mean, I always think of Homer Simpson saying, beer, it's the cause and the solution for all of life's problems. Which is so true, really.
It is, absolutely.
And if you don't have any other coping mechanisms that you're used to using, you're going to go to what you know.
Right.
Which is picking up the drink, the drug, the gambling, the whatever.
Right. Absolutely. And, you have your own addictions that obviously is the victim really is you and your body. But then how it is that your behavior affects other people as well.
Yes.
When you are in these thralls of addiction.
That's a really important part of this. And what I've seen and what other people report is that, when people are, say, having a drinking problem, cocaine, drugs, whatever, usually the job is the last thing to go. If they're working, they've got a family, usually the family is gone before the job is gone, because people can pull it together for 8 hours and put on a good front.
Right.
But the relationships suffer, and what happens really is, as they say, it's like the alcohol or the drug becomes their best friend, their lover, their everything.
Right.
Because they get the feeling they want from that. And it is similar to the feeling of love, when you fall in love and everything's rosy and you're walking on air, and who doesn't want to feel like that all the time?
And it's true. I mean, exactly. And it is true. And a way to escape some really heavy things that are probably going on in your life, or that go on in your life. Sometimes.
Absolutely. When you look at this definition of addictions, they talk about treatable chronic medical disease involving interactions among the brain circuits, genetics, some people are more easily addicted, the environment, people who don't have the hope of a good job, who are, when
Right.
unemployment is high, that's a real problem.
Sure.
And individuals' life experiences, people who come from a difficult background, maybe they have PTSD, maybe they've experienced horrific trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it much harder to access, kind of that normal sense of well-being.
Right, absolutely. All right, so we're going to take one more commercial break and then be back for the last little part here of our show today. Don't go away. Welcome back to What's Happening Yucatan, your Friday night show with me, Stephanie Carmen. And we are talking today addiction with Dr. Nancy Sweeney. And so we're in the last part of the segment here, and I wanted to ask, okay, so people out there listening who say, okay, this is some of the questions that I've asked myself. Maybe not somebody who is, absolutely knows they're completely addicted, but has like these ideas. Okay,
Yeah.
Am I drinking too much?
Mhm.
Am I, losing my concentration, not being able to focus on my family or my work because I'm in this love affair that has me going crazy, and it's good and bad. Am I addicted to that? And how can I slowly but surely get back to my control, I guess, of my life?
Well, I think, you can do that by developing other ways of coping with stress. And God knows we all have stress these days. We live in this crazy world where, things are changing very rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think things like meditation is a wonderful counteraction to all of this because it develops parts of the brain that, can counteract the effects of addiction.
And I think that can help you concentrate. Whereas, we're talking about phone addiction.
Absolutely.
Meditation is like the opposite of that. It actually trains your brain to like slow down and not be stimulated.
Yes. And I can't remember if we talked about this in another show, but they have shown that there are structural changes in the brain with a regular practice of meditation. There are people at MIT studying brain structure, and you can rewire your brain. Even if you've experienced severe addiction, you can still slowly but surely, with the right kind of support, you can rewire your brain and learn to tune into the more peaceful part of life, the enjoyable part of life.
Right. And of course, this question is based on the people that are not like into a full-on addiction, because then when you have people that are just completely lost in their addiction, that's a whole other ball game as far as
they
recovery.
Really need a lot of support. And unfortunately, the healthcare system, the way it is nowadays, it's hard to get.
Right.
But people who, I think on the far end, you have people who have been drinking heavily all their lives and have caused a lot of brain damage.
Right.
There are those folks, there are specific brain syndromes that we see. And it also does damage to all the other vital organs when you've really been drinking heavily for years and not had appropriate nutrition. So that's the far end of the spectrum, or as we've all seen, perhaps, horrific videos of people on some of these street drugs that are just causing major damage. It's really frightening.
Right.
So that's a really extreme physical side of things that is very real and requires medical intervention, really intensive medical intervention over a long period of time. But in terms of, the stuff a lot of people struggle with that's a little short of that, you can do a lot. People can do a lot to really get better with the right kind of support.
So you mentioned meditation. What are some other things that you can do just day to day? I know they say, okay, if you feel like you have an addiction, just take it day by day. Say, okay, today I'm not going to have that glass of wine after work, or I'm not going to, get on my phone. I'll just say, like, what are the things that you can do day to day?
Yeah, I always say to people, you can't take something away without putting something in its place. It's not fair to ask yourself. You can't
have the wine, but you can have that piece of chocolate.
Yes,
you can have the chocolate.
I'd be on board with that. Yes, or you can, you can go dancing. It really depends on what do you like to do. Can you treat yourself to a sketching class, or learn salsa, or go to the movies, or anything that would be enjoyable.
Go for a walk.
Go.
That's kind of
physical exercise is really important, I think, for for any treatment of addictions, I think physical exercise, even if you kind of have to force yourself at first,
Right.
because that does release some of those feel-good chemicals,
Right.
and it burns off stress.
Or if you find you can give yourself little rewards. Like you say, okay, if I go this week without, whatever it is, the behavior, on Sunday, I'm going to take myself out to my best meal. Or I'm going to get the cochinita on, at the corner stand.
Take the money that you would have spent, say, on alcohol or cigarettes, whatever it is you're trying to manage.
Right.
And spend that on something for yourself.
Right.
Something healthy and fun.
Right. Or really sit down and do the math. Say, okay, I'm going to actually make myself look at these numbers. How much did I spend on, the cigarettes or the wine or whatever it is?
My
or the extra
intervention
food
with gamblers used to be, okay, you don't even have to tell me what it is, but I want you to go home and sit down and look at your bank account and add it up over the past year. You don't have to tell me what it is. You can if you want, but that alone was enough to get some people to stop. Right. Because they realized, oh my God. Yeah. I could buy a second house.
Right, my whole sense of security just went away.
Yes, and it's scary, especially with older people who have a lot of time on their hands. Gambling can be a real issue. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are your closing thoughts here on this particular section?
On this particular section, I think my closing thoughts are I feel very compassionate for people who are struggling with all forms of addiction because life is hard and we're not always taught healthy coping mechanisms growing up.
Right.
And we don't always have the opportunities to, get the education we want or the job we want. It's much harder for those who life is really hard due to economic circumstances, family circumstances. So I have a lot of compassion, and a lot of understanding for why somebody would want to do whatever they could to feel better.
Right.
My focus is always on, okay, is there a better way to feel better? One that's not going to cost you so much in the long run and that improves your potential in the future. Healthy coping mechanisms allow you to expand your life while an addiction causes you to contract your life. So if you're doing healthy coping mechanisms, hopefully you're doing a yoga class or exercise or dance, you're meeting new people, and over time you're feeling better about yourself instead of feeling worse.
And I think that's where is the main thing there. And also I know we only have a minute or two left, so we'll probably get this part 2, which part 2, by the way, is going to be a history of addiction, the ever-evolving story. So I will let you know in the next couple of weeks that'll be coming on. But when you're living with somebody with addiction, that's really hard. Then you get into, are you an enabler or what do you do when you have this addicted person in your space all the time? And somebody who you really love, could be a partner or your kid or your brother or whoever it is.
Somebody you really care about. Yeah, well, we can go back to that in part 3 because that's a really important part of the picture. Yeah, and that is really hard for a lot of people.
Yeah. It's hard to know what to do.
Well, especially when you see somebody that you can see, oh my gosh, that's so destructive. Why aren't they stopping?
Right.
And they may try to stop and go back to it, and the family members are going crazy, Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can't believe he totaled another car.
Right.
It's like.
And then the family member becomes the enemy, and it's
or they try to take charge and hide all the booze.
Right. Yeah.
Then they're the bad guy.
They're the bad guy. Exactly. Yeah. So that it's a complicated
it's
topic.
A really complicated
and that
topic.
goes all the way across the board. That's why I wanted to talk about this, because it's something that we all deal with. Yes. We all have certain addictions on certain level. Let's be real.
Yes.
In general, right?
And it's become more and more prevalent in the United States. The life expectancy in the United States has actually gone down over the past couple of years, partly because of fentanyl.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And it's one of the leading causes of death of young people.
Oh, geez.
So it's really, it's huge. It's huge.
It's huge. It's a big topic. All right, well, we're gonna finish up for today. So thanks everyone, and don't forget to follow us on Mid-City Beat, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, also Radio Mundo 89.3. They are also on Facebook, Instagram, and they are on Twitter as well. And tune into the radio station. There's all sorts of fun shows and all sorts of things
There's
here.
fun to be had.
There's fun to be had that isn't so addictive,
Yes.
right? Or you can be addicted to listening to what's happening in your stomach. That's fine. That's a good one.
You won't hate yourself in the morning.
You won't hate yourself in the morning, exactly. All right. Well, everyone have a wonderful Friday evening. Be safe, and we'll hear from you next week. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Very interesting. Okay, so let's see. Let's see how that went. Okay, we're going to